so the car would lean a little bit and grip. He goes into turn four, and the tire flexes against the ball joint. It rips the sidewall of the tire open. The car goes abruptly up to the right, and that was where the end of the grandstand was back then. It wasn't seats all the way around. It was at the end of a concrete grandstand. It hits the end of that grandstand and just punts the car up in the air like a punt, and it just keeps climbing like just spiraling like a punt. And then it hits on the nose and begins to roll side over side. I think someone finally got the video when it hit and was rolling, but you didn't see it spiraling in the air like a punt. It just got suddenly quiet. Then the only thing I could hear was Earnhardt's car coming through over into three, and he gets to four and he sees his car tumbling, and Rusty's car actually comes to rest with the nose of the car up on the pit wall, and the roof is all pushed down, and I'm only like 20 feet away, so I run over there. Earnhardt comes by him and slides his car to a stop. And I look in, and the window net's pushed down, the roof's pushed down, and I can't get the window net down because it's all bent and crumpled. But I can see him slumped over in the seat, and there's blood trickling out of both sides of his mouth. He's not breathing. I know and I'm an ER doc, so he's not breathing, and his uniform's not moving. And he had an open face helmet, so thankfully I could see. So I'm trying to get my fingers through the window net as hard as I can to grab his chin. I want to pull his chin forward to try to get an airway until we can get to him. And suddenly here comes Dick Beatty, the NASCAR director, and a couple other people, and Dick screaming, what do we get? I said, Dick, I got to get to him. He's not breathing. I got to get to him. And so I said, Earnhardt, and meanwhile, had jumped out of his car, and he's trying to climb in the passenger window in Rusty's car, but the roof is so crumpled out he can't. So he's getting up on the roof, on the hood, and screaming. And I said, Dale, they got to get this roof off. So they grab a bunch of Winston Cup officials' hats and put them over my face so I don't get burned. They get the saw, and they're trying to get the roof. Well, I'm holding Rusty's jaw through the window net, and we get to him, and I'm able to, within like a minute and a half, I could see his chest move a little bit and a little bit more. So we had enough of an airway. And turns out what had happened is that Rusty had, right before he jumped in the car for practice, had inhaled a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
Ham sandwiches. And Rusty does everything in a hurry. That's why our nickname was Ricochet. He does everything in a hurry. So Richard Petty saw him and said, "Man, boy, you don't need to be eating that sandwich before we get in a race car. That's a bad deal." He inhales his ham sandwich, hardly chewed it, just swallowed it. And when he did the tumbling, this chunks of ham sandwich came back up in his esophagus, blocked his airway. And so anyway, we get to him, and we're able to get the backboard and get him out and get him breathing. I got an ambulance right there beside the car with him. Knew we had an airway and an IV. He's starting to come around, and he's breathing. So they said, "Look, I can't leave. I got to do a bush race in about an hour and 45 minutes." So they take him to the hospital, and I go out and I'm walking down pit road like an hour later, and I get word from the hospital. Rusty called the racetrack and had them patch him through to the TV truck. And said from the hospital, and said, "You tell Doc that I'm okay." And but he was watching on the screen the pre-race, and I'm standing there, and I still got soot from all over my face from where they were cutting the car, the smoke from the car, and paint flecks from the car in my hair, what little hair I had. And he said, "You tell him I'm okay, but Doc, you look terrible." I mean, because I had stuff all over my face where they cut the car. And then right before the Busch race started, Earnhardt was in the Busch race that night. And he walks up to me on pit road, and he walks right up to me, looks me in the eye, and said, "Hey, do you realize that earlier today you probably saved Rusty Wallace's life?" He looked at me and he stopped. He said, "Why would you do something like that? Why would you do that?" And then we both laughed because typical Earnhardt. But we laughed. I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "We got lucky, Dale. We got lucky because even though they were fierce competitors on the track, they were buddies off." So I said, "We got really lucky this afternoon, my friend. Very lucky." So,
wow. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. There was a couple more stories that came up. Dustin, go ahead. You've been quiet. I'll let you.
I'm curious to, ask you, Dr. Punches, what was going through your mind when his car settled out, when it was sitting on the pit wall? What was going through your mind at that particular moment?
Well, I wasn't sure. I've seen cars get airborne back then, and get really high in the air. You wouldn't believe that could happen in a stock car. And I'm thinking, where's it going to go? And I'm just looking up, and I'm thinking, it looked like it went straight up, hit the wall, and the wall sort of pushed pushed it back away from the stands. And so it was tumbling just over the middle of the straightaway. I thought it was going to come down and hit the flag stand. And I said, that's going to be horrific, or hit the fence. And it came down the track and began to roll. And it could have rolled over toward pit road. It could have rolled, but it didn't. It rolled right down the racetrack. I'm thinking, so I'm worried about which way it's going to go. And I'm worried, and I'm looking around because you don't have a lot of time. You've got maybe, 3 seconds, and trying to decide, how many these people, and there's people there working on cars. There's, all these Busch cars are on pit road. People are underneath them, changing gears and stuff. How many of these people can I get out of here in 3? You just don't have time. And fortunately, and then it hit, and then I could see him, him slumped over in a car, and it was like 20 feet from where I was standing. And it was funny how a lot of people just took off running, because they could see the smoke and the sizzling. And I never even thought about that part of it. I guess I'd have been smarter. I'd have taken off running too. But instead I went to the car because I was going to see if I could, how he was. Nothing against Bristol, because other tracks didn't have trauma guys there either. That's one of the reasons at NASCAR. And years later, Bill France Jr., Les Richter, NASCAR Vice President Les Richter, who was on a hospital board in California, and Les and I sat down and basically put together a little booklet of rules, mandatory rules for tracks. That for safety you had to have a physician there before the cars went on the racetrack. Now, truth be known, I was still working some for MRN and some for ESPN as a medical doctor, as a trauma doctor. And I'd get there on Friday and look up, and there was supposed to be a flag. They were going to put a flag. The concept was to put a flagpole up by the medical center. And very nonchalantly, they would raise a flag up there when the doctor was there, and then everybody would know it's okay to practice. Well, that didn't get very far. And so I remember I was at Martinsville a few weeks later, and I went over and I started practicing. And I said, hey, I won't mention the official's name. I said, hey, is there a doctor here today? He said, yeah, we got a doctor here. I said, who? He said, you. I said, I don't count. I'm here I had my little ESPN jacket. I said, this says ESPN. I said, I'm working for ESPN. I'm not working. He said, yeah, but if somebody gets hurt, you're going to be our guy. I said, well, and they knew that. They knew that would happen. So that's now it's a whole lot more sophisticated today than it was back then.
Right. Now, when NASCAR was trying to implement all these new safety features, the Hans device was great. It was too late, unfortunately. But did NASCAR ever come to you and say, we want your input? How can we make these cars any safer? Were you in any of those discussions?
Well, not specifically. I used to fly when I lived in Florida. I would fly on the NASCAR plane every week to and from. They would. Mr. France, the France family were great to me because I was at the medical center down the street, and if they had a medical problem, they could call me. Or likewise, if one of their employees had a problem, they could call me, and we'd be more than happy to take care of them. And they would have the pilots call me and say, "Hey, Doc, what time can you leave today? We got to be in Michigan by 7 o'clock. They got a dinner tonight." And I'd say, I can be out of here by 3 o'clock. So I just really come to the hangar in my scrubs and change into my jeans and a blazer, and we get on the plane and go, and they'd get me back Sunday night. So they were really good to me. So we did a lot of informal discussions about safety. Les Richter and others. But see, back then, no one realized, you didn't really understand, that there was not a lot of technology, computer, CAD CAM technology as to how to make these cars safer. If you go to the museums and look at the old roll cages and the seats in those cars, there were no surround seats. There was no flexibility in the seat. There were springs that could compress your spine. Probably one of the reasons that the David Pearsons of the world and the Ned Juris and all those guys back then had all these spinal cord issues because they were bouncing around in the seat and the spine was just compressing. There was, but eventually we began looking at more and more ways to keep them safe. We were actually looking at ways, fire suit stuff and fire resistance and gloves and the window nets to keep limbs and extremities in the car. And then there was a period of time back then, remember, where everyone thought you should build the cars really, really stiff. And they build the NASCAR modified cars really stiff. So if it hit, the car wouldn't give. When that happened, you saw the Richie Evans and stuff at Martinsville. When those cars hit, there was no way that nothing could give but the driver. Then the results are pretty horrific. They ended up working really, really hard on understanding. The sad part is it was a tragedy with loss of Dale, but that loss, that tragic loss of one of the icons, all-time legends in our sport, I tell people it's probably saved a half a dozen drivers' lives since then because of things that were done. That it's to make the car safer.
I could think of at least 5 wrecks just like that driver should have died. I mean, the Kyle Busch wreck on the inside wall where he broke both legs, that would have killed him in the 2001 car.
Yeah, the Michael McDowell qualifying when he driving for Michael Waltrip, he rolled it side over side at 203 miles an hour or whatever it was, and that was he was right at 201 or 202 when he hit the wall in Texas and rolled. And without those crush zones and the Hans device and the side door impact, everything they put in that car from Earnhardt's crash, that and Michael walked away with a scratch on the back of his hand, and that would have, and he wouldn't have survived it, in my opinion, if those things hadn't been there. So we learned a lot. Every time there was, I'll say this: every time there was a major crash, NASCAR, they would go over the car with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find ways to make it safer, to make the seat safer and the roll bar. But we just didn't have a lot of technology of things we could do back then. But we've come a long way from leather helmets and single seat belts. Are you ever going to make a stock car completely safe and injury proof? No. Are you ever going to make, and look at the technology in Indy cars, and I've been there and seen how that's grown by leaps and bounds. But the safer barriers, all the things that have been developed now have really made a huge difference.
I appreciate the hand that you have touched with not just NASCAR, but like you said, IndyCar, ARCA. Like you touched on, you started out with MRN in 80, I believe I read.
Yeah, 80. I was at Daytona as an assistant for Ned Jarrett in 1979 when they had the little dust up on the back with the Allison boys and Kale, and Bobby Allison always. I used to fly some with Bobby, go to and from the racetracks, and I did PA for NASCAR. They'd want me to go do the Cup race and then go do PA the next day. Well, Bobby's going, so I get on a flight, and Bobby would always say, "Remember that race stock where Kelly Yarborough started beating on my fist with his face?" He said, "You remember? Why would he do something like that?" But I told I said, "You got to remember though, it took 2 of you Allison boys to handle 1 Yarborough." He said, "We had him handled it." I said, but that's but yeah, 1980 started with MRN. I was the garage reporter. There was no lower form of life on radio than the garage reporter. My job was to stand there in a little cubby hole in the garage and wait for somebody to fall out of the racing. And they had no portable equipment back then, so I had to go beg them to come wherever I was, come where I was, which is way over by the scales, and do an interview. And they said, that's your job. If somebody falls out, and if it's somebody important that we want, and if we think we have time, then you put my microphone cord was about 3 feet long, stuck in the side of the wall there by the scales. I couldn't move hardly. I could only move like a foot either way. And I drug a garbage can over there and put a piece of plywood over it so I'd have a place to sit, lean on. And that was my station. So that was my first show. And then the first car out of the race, like early laps, was a guy named AJ Foyt. He comes rolling by that bright orange Gilmore orange Ford car, smoke billowing out behind. So they heard Barney Hall say, "I'm going to go to commercial." They went to commercial, and I clicked my microphone and said, "Hey, this is Jerry Punch in the garage area. AJ Foyt just came by me, blew the engine like lap 10 of the Daytona 500. I'm going to run get it." And they clicked my mic off, and they're all dying laughing like, "Yeah, right, this kid's going to learn a valuable lesson, a very valuable lesson." But I set the mic down and went over there, and his car was way in the back, his parking spot. By the time I get over there, there's a whole throng of people around his trailer, including Chris Economack. He was screaming, "AJ, I want to talk to you, AJ." And AJ's not talking to anybody. He's up there just spitting mad, yelling at his car owner, Jim Gilmore. And I go walking up I said, excuse me. And I go right by Chris Economacky and all these people that were waiting at the bottom of the ramp. I go walking up the ramp into the back of the hauler, and I'm about a foot behind AJ. And everyone's expecting AJ to whirl around and just deck me because he's so angry. AJ spins around like that, looks at me, and he looks at me, and he's just so beat red, so he's so angry. He says, Doc, what are you doing here? See, early in the week, I was the doctor who did a lot of the physicals there for the drivers and got their license physicals done. So I had done his physical earlier because he was my hero growing up. So I had known him, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I'm actually working a radio broadcast today, and I'm sorry about your age, AJ." He said, "But I'd like to get you on a radio broadcast." He said, "Radio broadcast?" He said, "I thought you was a doctor." And I said, "Oh, no. I just wanted to get to know you like that because I had him buck naked in the room with gloves on. So he knew I had them. And he looked at me like that. And Jim Gilmore is standing behind him. And Jim Gilmore starts chuckling. And AJ looks at me and he said, "I'm just kidding, AJ. I am a medical doctor." He actually laughed. So where's your radio stuff? Because he knew that CBS was down there with Economaki trying to scream at him. And I said, "Well, I don't have any portable radio stuff." I said, "I got a little station over by the scales, way across the other side of the garage, over by the scales." And I said, "If you don't mind heading that way in a little bit," he said, "I'd love to talk with you." He said, "All right, I'll be right over." So I go down the ramp and it's like dead quiet at the bottom of the ramp. They're all waiting for AJ to grab me and just throw me down the ramp. And Economaki can't believe that I've done that. And so I go walking by and he starts yelling, AJ again. I go over and we're still and we've gone to commercial again. And I click on. I said, "Hey guys," it was Barney Hall upstairs and Jack Root. I said, "Hey guys, just talk to AJ Foyt." He said he'd be right over. And they start laughing again like, "I don't care." So then I click off, and it wasn't 5 minutes. Here comes AJ around the corner with this massive humanity. He's just thundering, walking along. And Chris Economaki still jumping along beside him like a little bunny rabbit saying, AJ, come on, AJ, CBS. And AJ hadn't stopped to talk to anybody. And it's a massive media and photographers and writers trying to get him and say he won't say a word. He comes right over to where I am, and I offered him my garbage can with a piece of 2x4 on it to sit. He declined, and I put the headset on him, and I clicked in. I said, "Hey, guys, Jerry Punch here in the garage area with Super Tex AJ Foyt." And you could have heard a pin drop on that broadcast. And so I did the interview with AJ. He couldn't have been nicer. I asked him 2 or 3 different questions. He gave great answers. We talked about it. And I didn't realize that, I mean, he gave me like 2.5 minutes because it was, Daytona 500 is getting ready to restart, but we're talking and they gave us all the time. And I clicked it off and thanked him. He walked right out of the garage area and never talked to CBS or anybody else. So the following week, when Sports Illustrated came out, back then Sports Illustrated was the Bible of sports. My entire interview with AJ was in Sports Illustrated. Every question every answer he gave. And so he was my hero growing up. Richard Petty was my stock car hero, and AJ Foyt and Mario were my open wheel IndyCar heroes. So, AJ and I became very, very close friends for many, many years to come. And when my first son was born, I named him AJ. So, yeah, pretty cool.
Man, that is awesome. I feel like we've educated a lot of people that may not know who you are. I mean, the thing with NASCAR fans is this: you've got generations that know you, and I mean, when you say NASCAR, there's a few names that come up, and you're in that group. And then you have these new fans of NASCAR, and I say new fans under 4 years, and they probably don't know some of the old drivers, some of the old broadcasters that they're Hall of Famers in their own right. And that's kind of what me and Dustin really enjoy doing the most, is educating new fans on how NASCAR got to here. Because these fans know Kyle Larson, they know Chase Elliott, they know the new guys, but they don't know the Jerry Punches, they don't know the Jackaroots, the guys that really put NASCAR in the spotlight for decades. I mean, you can give credit to ESPN. They jumped on something, but you were a huge role in MRN and ESPN forging a path with NASCAR to mainstream broadcasting. And on behalf of so many people, I really appreciate your work, and it has been truly an honor to have you on.
Well, thank you guys for having me. And I, it's just, I love getting a chance to relive some of those moments in the sport. And Chris, I thank you and Dustin for what you guys are doing to help people understand, we didn't get here. It took a long time to get here, 73 years, I think, NASCAR, 1949 for Cup, to be able to be where we are today. And there were a lot of legends, a lot of names. And if you don't know, and I would encourage the fans, if you don't know a lot about the sport, take a trip, take the family and convince the family and go to Charlotte and go to the Hall of Fame and go to, and go and look at those cars and go up to the Hall of Fame and read about some of those legendary drivers and some of the stories. It will be well worth your while to go in that Hall of Fame and be able to understand where the sport came from. Pretty doggone special. But hey, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I look forward to visiting you again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Have a good afternoon. Go see your wife.
I will do that. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
See ya.
See ya.
Dr. Jerry Punch. Man, what a guy. There's a lot of history with that guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could sit there and listen to him talk all day long. I really could. You could probably learn so much from him in his time, not just being a ESPN MRN broadcaster, but just a person in NASCAR. Because I'm sure he's heard, probably witnessed a ton of stories that we could probably make 5 podcasts out of.
It really is. The Hall of Fame, I went in 2018. Have you been, Dustin?
Yeah, I've been 3 or 4 times, I want to say. It was
Oh, nice.
right as when it was open, so
Go Pack. Long show. uh, but no, the Hall of Fame it really is. And there's not just the Hall of Fame. You've got the RCR Hall of Fame. You've got, Petty's got his own little version of the Hall of Fame. Hendrick has his little corner. They all the race shops that have been around for a long time have their version of a Hall of Fame. The one that I would like to do next, the RCR, go see our buddy Chocolate Myers and check in over there. But it was great to have him on. He's a guy that's been around racing a long time, not just NASCAR. He covered IndyCar, he covered ARCA. One of the guys I wanted to bring it up, the Don Marmer incident. It was an ARCA race driver who went head on into the tire barrier of pit road entrance, and the steering wheel got lodged into his chest, broke his ribs. They pronounced the man dead on the way to the Infield Care Center, and Dr. Jerry Punch was one of the ones that helped bring him back. And Don Marmer was very grateful, as he should be. And I don't even know if Don Marmer is still alive. I can't find any information on that. But, he was very fortunate to have Dr. Jerry Punch around. The broadcast side of Dr. Punch is amazing. I mean, he brought you a lot of stories. He brought you pit road news every race when he was working with ESPN. He did the same thing with IndyCar. I saw a few IndyCar races where he was, matter of fact, Danica Patrick was in a few race incidents. No kidding. And Dr. Jerry Punch was there to talk to her. But let's move into the actual current events. Now that we've done our NASCAR history portion, Phoenix was a good race. It offered. I feel like we saw a little bit of last year's car with the dirty air issues, but we did see some good racing. And like you've said, in the first 3 races, it came down to a teammate battle for a little while, a few times.
Yeah. It seems like that might be a trend for this season. That might be the theme of the seasons going forward. Though I just go ahead and say right now, Ross Chastain, come on. I feel so bad. He's run good. He's so close to getting that win. He's so close.
Where he messed up, and go back and watch it, he timed it wrong. He got on it just a little too early. I forget who was right behind him, but he got a bump from them, but he gave a bump to Chase Briscoe instead of being able to go under. So right before the start-finish line, when he would have been eligible to go down, he had just given Chase a bump, and it pushed him too far up to get to. If he times it just 2 seconds later, and he gets that bump, he wins his race.
Yeah.
I'd have to look again and see who was behind him, but whoever was behind him on the restart was giving him a bump, trying to get him up to Briscoe. Reddick the same. Reddick's coming awful close. In my article for the preview, I picked 4 drivers. I had Chase Briscoe, Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain, and Kevin Harvick. And on that last restart, all 4 were at one point running top 4. And I was just like, wow. I don't know if I got lucky or what, but Harvick ended up 6th, so I'm still happy with that. But
Yeah.
what a race.
My pick did not finish anywhere near where I thought he would. Martin Truex, 35th,
I don't
second to
know.
last.
I don't know what's going on with the Gibbs guys. I think I have a general idea. I would love to get one of them. I'm gonna see if one's available this week for like a. They have the NASCAR availability during the week, and if I get one on, I'm gonna ask them. Point blank, what's going on? But it seems like because there's only 6 of them, and there are so many Fords and so many Chevys that they're just behind on some of the test and tune notes. I would imagine Ford and Chevy have collected a lot of material from testing and redistributed what they're allowed to, and it's paying off because you look at the winners this year, 2 for Ford, 2 for Chevy. I mean, Toyota's not really getting close. They started decent, and then as soon as Denny Hamlin, who was the guy I thought would have a good race for the Toyotas, as soon as he got in traffic, his car was trash. Um, Kyle Busch made it through the pack, but I never saw Kyle Busch as a real contender. I think he used his stuff up trying to get to the front in all those instances. What did you see? What stuck out to you?
Well, I gotta be honest with you. I mean, this was probably one of the better Phoenix races I've watched in the past few years. It wasn't like a this is the objective best Phoenix race ever, but it was better. It was better than the championship race last year, which
Yeah.
I mean, you go from the package we had last year to this one. It was a difference, and like you said, dirty air. I still think played somewhat of a factor, even with that rear diffuser. But then again, this is Phoenix. I mean, we went from Daytona to Auto Club to Las Vegas. And we saw good results there. Phoenix is kind of the weird track that first weird track we've went to. I'm going to be honest. The first 4 races have all been good races. I mean, there hasn't been a real there we go. No, this race wasn't good. It's fairly boring. Nothing really happened. Again, I'm not overhyping this car, but I mean, I'm liking what I see with car. I really do, and you can see it with the finishing results. I mean, look at this. Briscoe, he wins. Chastain, Reddick, Blaney, Busch, Harvick, Kyle Busch, Logano, Suarez, Busher. You're seeing guys that we don't see up there often anymore. I mean, look at this. Let's see, where's Bowman? Bowman, last week's winner, finished 14th.
14th, yeah. He had a decent car for a little while, but all the Hendrick guys just fell apart. I don't know what happened there.
But yeah, that's a fairly good point. I'm glad you brought that one up. But I think the theme this year is you're going to see a bunch of guys that, last year you would have said, oh, they're going to finish in the top 20. Oh, they might get a top 15. Oh, they get lucky, they get a top 10. And you're seeing guys like Ross Chastain. You're seeing guys like Daniel Suarez finishing in the top 10, competing for wins. I think the tone of this year is you're expect the unexpected.
I think the theme is first time winners.
And that too.
We've had 2 different first time winners for Ford, the 2 Chevy winners, both Hendrick, but you open Daytona and you've got a brand new first race in his ride, Austin Cindric winning the Daytona 500, and then you roll out Chase Briscoe, who was fast everywhere. It's not like he just popped up and this was his race. He's been fast a little bit of everywhere. I enjoy seeing him go 6 wide on the restarts and diving onto the apron. The new car, 2 from me.
I
It,
mean, yeah, I agree.
it
I
was good.
agree.
I like that 6 and 7 wide. It doesn't work well going into the turns, but it's great for that little 160 feet stretch of terrain they got there.
Exactly. Good entertainment for just a little bit of time.
Yeah. This week, well, I'll finish with last week, and then we'll go to this week. This week I'm really excited for, but I thought it was a so-so race as far as the finish was what I kind of expected. I didn't think that we would get a last lap pass. I mean, this place is there's room, but the line dictates the finish quite often here. And
Hmm.
once you get the car rolling and you get past one lap at this place, the outside line it's too hard to get back to the gas on the bottom to pass anybody anywhere else
Yep.
but the top. So as soon as Briscoe, got free, I figured the race was over. I didn't think anybody come close to catching him, and he had a fast car. It's not like he lucked his way into it or backed his way into it, if you will. But congrats to Chase Briscoe.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
congrats to the guys that were runner-ups to him. Like you said, Ross Chastain and Tyler Reddick. Those guys are going to get a win. It is simply a matter of when. And I still say before summer starts, both of those guys get a win. It might be this weekend in Atlanta because nobody knows, what you're going to run into at Atlanta. The track is different. The configuration is a little different with progressive banking. You don't know if the top is really the way to go. It might not be the case. That's what they intended. The
Hmm.
Harvick line's supposed to not work now, but I think you're going to find a little bit of everything there. And I'm excited.
I'm extremely excited to see what this track is going to race like next week.
I think it's going to be a lot of 2 and 3 wide racing. Um, I'm not going to say it's going to be like the old style we had last year where you can draft your way through this place by no means. But Blaney, that's a good pick. He's won Atlanta before. He's a good mile and a half guy. Um,
Aren't they using the 550 package for Atlanta?
they're using a package similar. Uh,
Similar. Okay.
they're using that horsepower, but they're not changing the car like they were last year. They were adding different style or different length rear spoilers. They were creating more drag. They're not doing that here. They're just going with the lower horsepower. Um, and let me look into that because I don't know if they're even doing that for this race. I had read somewhere they were going to stop doing that and just change the plate tracks, but let's see. Um, I'll have to look it up later and I'll post it. But Greg Biffle will be back for the Atlanta race, which is cool. I like seeing old Greggy out there running races.
It's cool to see him in the 500 again. Yeah, that's a name you haven't seen in a little while. Good kind of throwback to the 2010s when him and Roush were contenders every single week.
I'm surprised Carl Edwards hasn't popped back up with all the guys that are talking about doing races coming back. I really thought Carl would be a guy that, honestly, if I was putting things together when they said 2311 would look into another team, Carl Edwards was the guy that came up. And definitely not him. It's definitely Kurt Busch, but it was a guy I thought of first. Um, I don't know. Maybe he really just is enjoying his time away. I wasn't a Carl Edwards fan. Uh, I had my issues with him with wrecking Keselowski and wrecking a few drivers. He did some things that he probably should not have done,
Yeah.
and it's history. But
I, I will say this. I can't remember where I saw the interview, but it was I think the question came up to Edwards of him, if you were gonna go back, would you do one? Would you, do a race? Would you? He goes, if the cars had like 1,000 horsepower, no downforce, then I'd consider it.
So I guess we
And
won't see Carl.
well, I mean, they're increase the horsepower for this year. You're seeing that driver's skill start to come back a little bit. I mean, that might intrigue, pique his interest, but I mean, 670 is nowhere near 1,000 horsepower.
Nah. No. All right. So your dad's saying, Blaney, give me 2 drivers to watch for Atlanta. Go.
Portland. I've been off my ball. I called it one weekend, and then I've been on the dry spell. We're going to Atlanta. It's an unknown commodity because they just reconfigured it. I'm going to go my number one pick, Kyle Larson.
Okay.
And my second pick, I'm torn between either Blaney or Ross Chastain. I don't know which one to pick. Blaney seems like a really good pick because, like you said, he's really good at the mile and a house. But I am enjoying what I'm seeing out of Ross Chastain of running up front in the right places at the right time, but just can't close the deal. Atlanta might be the track he does it.
So you got Chastain.
I'll say Chastain and Larson. That'll be my picks.
I got you. 2 Chevys. I'm gonna go opposite from you and go 2 Fords.
Okay.
I'm gonna go Joey Logano. His is coming. They're running really well, and I'm gonna agree with your dad and say Blaney. One of those two is gonna win this race.
I like the idea. Logano was in my mind. I was like, man, I said he was going to win Las Vegas, and he didn't even get in the top 10. That's probably not a good idea. But Logano has done really well at Atlanta, so
He's shown a little bit of speed this year, but I think they're missing something, and I think the lack of front downforce for these cars, they haven't figured that out yet, is really messing with him. When he was really good at winning championships, I mean, he was able to really get that front downforce package figured out everywhere he went. So when they figure out the balance on the front, and if you listen to Joey Logano's radio, the thing he's always talking about is the front end's gone. I can't do this or I can't do it. He never complains about the rear. I don't know what it is about his driving style, but he seems to always have an issue with either the front plowing or the front's just not stable when he gets back in the get whatever. But it's always a front end complaint. So maybe it's something they're working on. I like the picks. I could see Larson getting it. The cylinder wasn't his issue or wasn't his fault. It was an engine issue at Phoenix, but I never saw him really winning that race. He wasn't a big time contender. I thought that William Byron would have a better finish. Like I said, the Hendrick guys just really fell off. Chase Elliott looked like he was going to win. And that last pit stop put him out of contention and then just spun. I don't know. I don't exactly remember what happened, but he spun with, called, 6 laps to go or something like that. It wasn't very many.
yeah, it was somewhere around there, I believe.
So I'm not picking a Toyota driver until they show some speed.
Yeah.
Practice is different. Qualifying is different. When the race starts, those guys are falling back. Their bell cow has been Kurt Busch this year. He's been the guy that's run really well. That's not a good sign when he's really getting the 5th or 6th best equipment out of the Gibbs garage. For Kurt Busch to be showing them up is it's not great. So changes to be made.
No. I mean, credit to Kurt. Kurt Busch is a talented driver, but when you got 4 of the Gibbs Toyotas just not really showing anything, and you got the how is it the second Gibbs team, their number one driver out there just tearing them up every week. I mean, it really is not a good look for Gibbs. And they had two drivers in the championship hunt last year, and now those two drivers aren't looking so good.
I mean, that's basically the equivalent of Harrison Burton, getting all the wins this year and Penske equipment. It's
Yeah.
about the same.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what else do we have. Not a whole lot of big news. We got Justin Haley. He's going to be coming on the show in the coming weeks. I don't have an exact date yet. His PR has been, emailing us back and forth. They said they're interested. They're just trying to find the right time.
Mhm.
I'm going to find this Ken Martin guy that the doc was talking about. I'm trying to get him on the show because if he is the behind the scenes man, we will definitely have some behind the scenes stories for you guys, which I enjoy. I think that was the best part of Chocolate too, was hearing things that nobody had ever probably heard outside of the people that were there, and those are cool stories. Um, Atlanta, tune in this week. It's going to be a good race. This is going to be different. Those guys that have been watching for years, Atlanta, even the last repave wasn't a configuration change. That was just a resurface. This is different. You're talking about um, a progressive banking that should allow for guys to run the top, throughout a run, not just, till the tires wear off. I mean, this should really help with racing. I'm excited.
Exactly. And like you said, with the track the way it is, this car showing us that it is good. You can run. You can run with people and all that. I mean, I'm expecting this race to be, at the very least, a 7 out of 10.
Crazy good. Yeah. I would say seven's like, if it's caution filled, it should be 8 or 9. It is not considered a super speedway. Um, they consider super speedways to be only Daytona and Talladega. I'm not exactly sure what the classification requires, but I'm pretty sure it's over 2 miles, which the exception is California because Fontana, I believe, is 2 miles. But because of the turns and they have to let off the gas, I don't think they consider that a super speedway either.
I think that how they classify it is super speedway and plate tracks are the same thing, and then you have speedways, which is like Fontana and Michigan, intermediates, which are like the mile and a half, 1 mile tracks, and you have short tracks, which are Bristol, Martinsville,
Road courses.
and then road courses are their entire different breed.
Yeah, and then you have tracks like Gateway that are coming in. Gateway is a heck of a racetrack. It's an intermediate. Uh, Gateway is that's going to be exciting racing, especially with the new car. I don't know if you've ever seen the old Busch races there or the Xfinity races. I think they've had a few there, but that place has produced really good finishes. Check up on the history of that, man. Those Gateway races were crazy.
I have watched a few of a few Xfinity and a few Truck Series races there, and I love Gateway. I love the design of that place. It's just, it reminds me a little bit of Darlington, but with very little banking. So that everyone is like trying their best to. I want the inside line. No, I want the inside. So they're always right up against each other the entire time, trying to keep each other from passing one another.
Let's see. Gateway is June 5th. Well, they call it Worldwide Technology Raceway now, but it's Gateway. They just changed the name. I'll call it whatever they want to call it, but it's Gateway.
Yeah, it's Gateway. It's like Coke. What's it called now? Coke Zero Sugar. It's just Coke Zero. It's
Yeah,
the same thing.
it's just the Coke 400. Nashville too. We got no 3 weeks. We get a week off. So you've got June 5th. You've got Gateway. June 26th. You've got Nashville. So we'll get 2 new tracks in the same month. Um, Road America is another track that we have not gone to in the Cup Series. I think that's a first. I don't think we've been there before.
I think we went there last year.
Did we really?
Yeah. I did not mean to hit my mic, but
That's their July 4th race this year. It was July 3rd, but
I think it was Austin Cindric in the 33 car. He had an incredibly good Road America race, and at the very last handful of laps, it all went downhill for him. That sounds right.
I'm a little disappointed that they took away, the July 4th weekend race at Daytona. That was always a special time. But
yeah, I didn't like that move.
Well, we are out of time, guys. Thank you all for watching. This has been a good show. Really enjoyed. Again, thanks to Dr. Jerry Punch for coming on.
Absolutely.
Dustin, I'm gonna find you a special guest that you will lead with, because you just let me go, and I'm like, take over.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I got intrigued by Jerry Punch. I mean, that guy's an idol when it comes to ESPN. I can't help it.
Great show. I enjoyed the show. Thank you.
I did too.
We did good things, and I really enjoy. I know you do too. Bringing history to the viewers that might be new to NASCAR, or because there's so many great stories that go untold because everyone focuses on the now with the next gen car, but like he said, we got here somehow. We didn't just walk in the door to this much success.
Yeah.
All right, man. On behalf of the ASAP Sports Network, I think we did good. Check those guys out on Tiki Live TV. They've got shows on just about every platform now: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you name it. They've got it. Fox C Network, everywhere. They're going to regular TV soon. We may be switching days as far as the show goes. I'm gonna get with you after that, so that we can transition to the regular TV listing slots. So we'll figure that out. But I'm excited. The show's really gonna start kicking up soon. Special guests are going to start rolling in again. They had to get over that West Coast trip, and now they're ready to talk. So, bring it back next week. We'll see you guys Monday. I hope everybody has a good week. It's always race week. That's the best part. All right, y'all have a good one.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.